Welcome back, listeners, to Drug Diversion Insights. Today's interview is with someone who is a familiar face to many of you. I've had him on the podcast before. John Burke is the executive director of IHFDA. John is officially retiring from IHFDA this year, so I decided to do something a little bit different. We are going to spend some time getting to know the man, John Burke, and in the process, we'll learn a little bit more about IHFDA as well. So IHFDA, and I'm going to ask you this, John, how did you guys come up with that name? IHFDA rolls off the tongue, but I always have to do someone will think I'm either lying or just thinking, depending on which way my eyes are going, which we know that's not true, really. But International Health Facility Diversion Association. That's what it stands for. So I will ask you about that and that name. But first, let's start off with a welcome. And tell us a little bit about what led to your law enforcement career. We've spoken before, we've filmed a podcast before, we've gone over some of your history and what your background is. So some of this might be a repeat, but I think we need to start there to move forward with getting to know you a little bit better. So how did you pick law enforcement?
Well, first of all, thanks, Terri, for having me. It's kind of something that it's really kind of sounds like a familiar thing, but I always wanted to be a cop.
Okay.
And so that was kind of the way. And I was able to get into a kind of unique program in Cincinnati in 1968, was a police cadet. So, and you co-op. You went to University of Cincinnati for a quarter, and then you worked for a quarter. And then after 3 years, you basically had finished your associate's degree, and you came into the next recruit class. So that's how I got started. Always wanted to do it. Got an opportunity. I had messed up my knee, but I got it fixed up, and they still let me come on. And that's how I got started. And I was thrilled to death, obviously, to be part of it. Yeah.
Did you have something in your family history? Did you have officers in your history? I mean, what was it? Was it just a desire to always be a cop, or did something in particular happen when you were younger that made you want to go in that direction?
No, there was no one in my family who had been a police officer. I now have 2 sons and a grandson who are, but I had nobody that when I came on. And so I can't, the standard answer you always give too, and it's true, is you wanted to help people. But also, let's face it, when you're young, it looks like an exciting career and something that I wanted to do. I was just always very much focused towards trying to be a police officer.
Okay. Yeah, great. And active. I mean, some people don't want to be behind a desk or sitting or that kind of job. They want to be out in the field in some way.
And the other thing that always intrigues me about police work, every day was different. There was no repetitiveness, as you said, like sitting behind a desk. Every day was different. You really didn't know what was happening, but you knew that there were going to be some challenges and things you needed to fix. And so all that appealed to me.
Right. Okay. Were you ever injured on the job?
Yes. A few times. Had some stitches. Got hit on the head with a bowling ball. If you know those little bowling balls and those that they use in the arcades. I don't know if you're familiar with those. But
yeah. I know exactly what you mean. Yeah.
I had a guy come up from behind me and hit me several times with that, and ended up having to shoot him actually. So that was the only time I ever fired my gun. But so I got injured a few times. Some other things, stitches for, got cut on some glass or whatever, but nothing more than beyond the bowling ball thing.
Okay. Yeah. Do you remember how that played out? If he's behind you hitting I know exactly what you're talking about. Those balls that you're throwing into the rings at the arcade. Yeah.
They're very hard. They're every bit as hard as a bowling ball. They're just much smaller. Put them in your hand. And he had me down and was wailing away at me. So.
Okay. All right. So some excitement there. Was that early in your career or a little bit later on?
Yeah, I probably had about 4 years on, and that was in old clothes. So it was stupid what I did, frankly. I went into a bar, didn't have my radio with me, and found him back with a girl who was underage, and she was drinking beer, took the glasses away and went up to, and had no cell phones in those days, went up to use the bar phone. And after I hung up, he came up behind me before I turned around and started hitting me on the head with the ball. So
Okay.
it was a dumb thing on my part, really.
Well, lessons learned. Were you
Yeah.
on duty? Or
Oh
were
yeah,
you
yeah,
off
yeah.
duty?
Well,
Yeah,
I
you
was
were on
working.
duty.
I was working. Oh yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Well, lessons learned. We have a good friend whose son is a police officer. And I think it was during his probation period, actually, he ended up on a car chase through LA area on the news. Choppers caught everything. And the whole thing was quite interesting and, comical in a way where something like that can be comical when you hear the whole story. But yeah, the friend of ours was like, look, he was on TV during his 90-day probation period.
Oh, that's funny.
Everything ended fine. They caught the person they were trying to catch. Kind of a funny story along the way. But yeah, that was very early on in his career. And
Yes.
can't imagine doing that.
And I was involved in many car chases, and I can tell you that even though I've seen a policeman on TV say that it's a cop's worst nightmare, to be honest with you, it's actually exciting, and it's not your worst nightmare. I mean, you hope it all ends with no problems. They're very dangerous, very dangerous.
Yes.
But catching the person is very satisfying too.
Right. Wow. Okay. All right. How did you get involved? So I know that Natty was an organization for drug diversion, very law enforcement kind of focused. So I'm guessing that's kind of how you got connected with that. But walk us through how you got involved with Natty originally, which then eventually led to starting IHFDA. So let's talk about the original involvement.
Well, towards the end of my career, I was assigned to internal affairs. You know what internal affairs is, I think everybody knows, where you basically investigate police officers. And I did that for 2 years. And when you're done, they try and find a job you want to go to because they're looking for some other schmuck to replace you that maybe has some thought of, well, at least I'll get a good assignment when I'm done with this one. And so I got offered to go to back to homicide, where I'd been as a detective, go as a sergeant, and I turned that down. They had a new job with 6 investigators and a secretary and myself called Pharmaceutical Diversion. And it was a grant that we had gotten from the state of Ohio, the Ohio Pharmacy Board. And so I thought that sounded a lot more appealing. In a big department, a sergeant would never be able to run and make decisions in your own agency. And I was able to do that with this. So that's how it started. I had some experience on the street with prescription drugs back when we were on the street, and heroin was big. Prescription drugs were also big, and I got to know a lot about them. Oxycodone was the primary drug at the time, and how they used them and abused them. And so for some reason, prescription drugs always had a little bit of interest in my mind from that work on the street. And so we started the Pharmaceutical Diversion Squad at Cincinnati Police Department, and it was something we did. I picked my people, got some great investigators that only one had a little bit of knowledge about pharmaceuticals. The others did not. But we got started. And the other thing that we did in there, after we were there not too long, we came up the issue of diversion inside healthcare facilities. And actually, this really attracted my attention, as you can imagine. That's why I'm involved in IHFDA, because of the nature of healthcare diversion. And the city had a case they got sued on, where 2 officers who weren't experienced had arrested a nurse, and it was horrible, and they lost quite a bit of money. I made sure we got briefed on that. But so we started that, and to do that, we coordinated. And we were so blessed. The Ohio Board of Pharmacy had 12 pharmacists that all had hospital pharmacy experience, and they would go around. And they were in different parts of the state, and so there was a couple of them assigned to us, and we started to use them. So they took our investigators into hospitals, showed them, all the things that go on with controlled substances inside a healthcare facility, and the forms that are used, and the violations, and all the things. So they were with us, kind of held our hand until we got to be more and more experienced. And I have to tell you, it's not an easy thing. It takes about a year to get good investigators. I mean, they were already skilled at interview and interrogation and how to follow lead. That wasn't the problem. The problem was learning about what health professionals do inside healthcare facilities and how they divert drugs. So that was an enormous help to us. We also ran into problems that we got some pushback by a couple of the hospitals, and they were able to help us immensely. Ohio has some great laws addressing drug diversion. So that's kind of how we kicked this whole thing off. And before you know it, we were arresting a nurse a week for probably 8 or 9 years. So I mean, about 50 nurses a year. And then we throw a pharmacist or a physician in there also for one reason or another. And nurses is not because nurses are bad people. It's because nurses represent the largest number of healthcare professionals. And that's the reason for it. So we got to be very experienced, very fast in this area, very specialized. But prior to that, even before we really got much into healthcare diversion, I sent one of my investigators in 1990 to a NATI conference, was in, I believe it was out in Colorado. And then there was one in Indianapolis. The first one I went to was either 91 or 92. There was one down in Florida. And after that, I got involved and eventually brought him to Cincinnati. We were averaging about 60 people a conference, and brought him to Cincinnati, and we jumped it to 160 for a lot of reasons. So there's a lot of interest in diversion in the highway, Indiana, Kentucky area. And then after that, of course, the numbers rose and stayed pretty steady. So I had a great time in NATI, helped them build that organization to what it is today. And they're doing a great job, I think, with it now. And what happened was probably, I don't know the exact year, but we were doing so I started to, myself and Denny Lucan came over. He was the treasurer for NATI, national treasurer. And I started to do some healthcare diversion seminars, and we would do them in places, just do healthcare diversion, Columbus, Indiana, and some other places. We did several of them. We were doing one in Gatlinburg, Tennessee, and I got a phone call from this lady named Kim New, and I didn't know Kim at all, and she didn't know me, but she said she was the diversion person in a large hospital in Knoxville, Tennessee, and she was a nurse, and she said, "Hey, I see you're having a diversion conference. I'd like to be a speaker." So I didn't know her, but I looked into her a little bit and said, "Well, sure." And so we brought her into this kind of regional conference that we were doing in Gatlinburg. And of course, she was great. And Kim and I became really good friends, and eventually formed IHFDA.
And as they say, the rest is history.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So shoot, I had a couple of questions when you were talking about, when you started getting into the healthcare diversion piece in Ohio and you were arresting one nurse a week, were the hospitals already looking, or was it because of your program that you kind of partnered with them and then assisted on their investigations? I mean, how did all of that play out?
Your latter one is more correct. They hadn't been doing a lot of it. I think when they stumbled on it or caught it, they would basically fire the person. There wasn't much beyond that. So we included them, the hospital, usually the security people, but obviously the pharmacy and nursing folks. I mean, we did an investigation. They were, these people helped us. Obviously, this wasn't something we went in and just did on our own. So. In those days they didn't have diversion teams yet, and so you a lot of times dealt with head of security, or you deal with head of pharmacy, and so yes. And once we got in there and they saw the program, all but one hospital group actually were very cooperative, and they would assist us. And then we had one hospital where the head of security was kind of running all that, and he decided that he wasn't going to cooperate. So we had a lot of legal stuff behind us. It was a crime not to report it in Ohio. It still is. And over Christmas, I remember they caught somebody. They didn't call us, and somebody dropped a dime. That's going way back. Dime for a phone call. Somebody dropped a dime on it to us, and I had a little chat with him. And the chat was basically, if this happens again, I'm going to lock you up. And that's not something we wanted to do. Can you imagine locking up the security head of a major hospital in Cincinnati for not reporting criminal activity? But he decided, fortunately, to go my way, and he started reporting, and then we had pretty much all the facilities in line. So if they would discover something, or pharmacists or whatever, they would call us. We also had a tremendous group of pharmacists that, as you know, that I think there was 3 major companies in Greater Cincinnati that covered nursing homes, and we had one lady at one of the companies that I would have loved to hire her. She was incredible. She would go into a nursing home and go through the records, and she could spot diversion. And we worked a lot with her. She would call us. So it got to be pretty good, obviously, to do all this. And this was, Terri, pretty much there was no software in those days.
Right.
It wasn't there. I do remember one time one of the most egregious nurses we had was a part-time nurse, and they knew they had diversion in the swing, and so I said, well, let's do a check, let's do a run on their administration records for the past month. And so all the other nurses were full-time, and their sheet would go, let's say, halfway to the floor, and then there's this other nurse that was part-time, and her thing would go to the floor and then halfway out the door. And so again, you didn't have to be Dick Tracy to figure out that there's probably a problem here. And she was diverting enormous amount of drugs. So that's how we did things. We didn't have software to rely on, and things have gotten so much better, I think, to having that tool in your toolbox.
Right. So it's interesting. Does Ohio still do it that way? I mean, I know a lot based on my experience. Law enforcement doesn't often get involved. They're just like, well, don't call us, call the DEA, or that amount isn't big enough, or, you can't really prove it if everything is documented. And so we talk about calling law enforcement, but they're certainly not involved to the extent that your group was back then in Ohio. Do they still do it that way?
Well, I would hope so, but not long after I left, and probably within 5 years of the time I left, they pretty much disbanded the pharmaceutical diversion unit. It's when the departments have budget issues, they look for something that maybe is the first thing they can cut, and they cut us out. And I don't know if there may be one person today, and there's no way she can be handling everything, especially diversion inside healthcare facilities. So it's kind of sad. Law enforcement's not doing their part. It's an extraordinarily, as you know, important part. It's not only you get the patient issue, and of course you've also got the nurse issue. Finding recovery, finding meaningful recovery, getting them as soon as you can, so that they can be better rehabbed than when you get them when they're almost dead, or you don't catch them in time and they overdose and die, or they commit suicide. Or, I mean, there's so many important issues that I know you're well aware of, and your viewers, I think, are too. So it's a shame that, but the focus is not there like it was when we were there.
Yeah, and the interviewing part too, right? We talk about that. You had said that it took you guys a while to learn the medical side of it, which is very true. I mean, you have to learn how to recognize when something doesn't seem right. Yes, this pages, her pages were 3 times longer than a full-time person. That doesn't take a Dick Tracy, but or a medical professional to figure that out. But other things do. It's like, well, that is weird. It's like, really, why is that weird? Because you don't have that medical background. So it takes time to learn. But it's the same way on the flip side. For the medical professional to learn how to do an interview is also extremely difficult. And especially if you're not doing them all of the time.
Exactly.
So that partnership is very important for that reason as well, to take advantage of where your skill set is.
It's very important. Plus, people could, we could do things off the facility. I mean, we did garbage collections. We did surveillances. We did things that the hospital's not going to be able to do.
Sure.
And you think about it, these people take their drugs home on the last day in particular, and where do they get rid of them? They throw them in the garbage. And we would do garbage pickups and get some really good evidence. So it's a team thing. It's no question.
Yeah, absolutely. And for those, if you have a healthcare professional that you call in to have a conversation with, right? And they're like, you know what, I quit. And they leave and it's all done. And it's like, okay, nothing came out of that. Do I report? Do I not report? We think so, but we never had a conversation. They're gone. We'll never get them back. That is a good time to have law enforcement then take over.
Exactly right. And that's a scenario that was pretty common when they knew that they were caught and they said, I quit. And now what? And
Right.
yeah.
Okay,
No, you're right.
that makes sense. Yeah. All right. So back to the origins of IHFDA. So you guys decided that you wanted a little bit more healthcare focus. Is that the reason that you held that first meeting?
Yeah, we, as you know, Natty is primarily law enforcement. And there's nothing wrong with that. But law enforcement, as we just discussed, had minimal interest in healthcare facility diversion. And really where the interest is and where the most of the work is with healthcare professionals. I wish that wasn't true, but it is. And so Kim and I decided that it'd be nice to start something. I was getting ready to retire from Warren County. I'd been there almost 16 years, I guess, and I was getting ready to retire from there, and I had some extra time. And so we decided to go off, along with Denny Lucan and even Marcia Stanton, who came a little bit later. We decided to go and get involved in this thing called IHFDA. And there were pitfalls, and Kim and I put up a fair amount of our own money to get things going. We had to get it registered in the state of Ohio. We actually hired a guy to help us, which made it a lot easier. But it was, and don't get me wrong, we greatly encourage law enforcement to attend, and a little few of them do. But it's if you look in the room, and I usually ask how many most of them are pharmacists in the room, and then nursing a second. So, but so anyway, that's why we left Natty and started this own endeavor.
Right. Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. I do know that I think Natty is trying to get back a little bit more into to healthcare and to include that, because it is it would be nice if there was that combination. But again, I mean, so many times, people say call law enforcement, and then the local law enforcement, they're not interested, probably because they're not qualified, they're not trained. Nobody set up that kind of task force like you had the benefit of doing and learning. And it takes time for that partnership, right? You're going to invest all that time.
And it takes money. And we had a grant. We started on a grant. Now the city picked up our expenses later, but you need that initial thing where somebody's willing to put up. And we started that whole thing on $400,000. It would probably be, $1 million today. And that has to be there. And the Ohio Pharmacy Board, I can't give them enough credit. They're the ones that secured the grants, and they're the ones that came in and helped us. So it was a great partnership.
Be a nice idea with all of the money that's out there now from the lawsuits, the opioid crisis and stuff.
Yes.
That's an idea of something to do. Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. So how'd you come up with the name IHFDA? Do you see I'm sporting IHFDA wear? This was the jacket that we got at the last conference.
Yes. By the way, you're an incredible speaker and presenter, and you've done this many years, and I really appreciate that.
Thank you, John.
Always
Thank
great
you.
to see you.
I was thinking, I don't remember the first conference, IHFDA conference I went to, the very first one. I don't remember what year it was, but I want to say I have not missed a year since then.
First one was in Cincinnati.
Okay. Have you had it in Cincinnati more than once?
No. That was
okay.
The first.
Then I came to the first one.
Then you've been to every one of them.
Okay. Then I've been to every one of them. Wow.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. We started in Cincinnati, obviously, because, Denny and I both lived there, and it was it made it a little bit easier that we didn't have to go out and scout out a spot and everything.
Yeah.
That's why we started there. We only had, I think, 2 corporate sponsors at that time, and now we have, I think, close to 20. And we had a very, very small exhibit area, maybe 3 or 4 exhibitors. So, but we had, I think we had like 150 attendees, so it wasn't real bad for the first one.
Right.
And that was the first place.
Okay. And I don't know if it was that year or the next year, maybe, that I ended up having dinner with your team, which was fun that night. Got to know you guys a little bit more.
Was that in St. Louis, or where was it?
I don't know. I can picture the restaurant, but I can't tell you what town it was in.
Yeah, I think it was St. Louis that you went to dinner with us over there. Yes, yeah, and that was like I say, we've always appreciated your support.
Well, that was fun. It's a fun group. You had a fun group that started all of this. Okay, so back to the name. Did you agonize over the name, or did it just come up?
Well, believe it or not, the IHFDA was settled. What came into play was, is it going to be American? Is it going to be national? And frankly, I probably leaned towards national, National Health Facility Diversion Association. But what Kim said, and she was right, she said, hey, we need to try and make this an international thing. And so that's where the international came in. And we have people from Canada. There were some people from Europe, but they never actually joined. But you do have some Canadian people, but the vast majority of our membership is the United States.
Yeah. Well, now that you offer virtual options, you could expand that. Yeah.
Right. Yes. And yes, we're real excited. This new collaboration with ASHP too, by the way.
Why don't you go ahead and talk about that a little bit?
Well, we got approached by ASHP, and I've been to ASHP meetings many times, as I'm sure you have. And there's only like 5 cities in the country that can hold them because there's 30,000 pharmacists there. And I've done presentations there, and I've always been impressed with ASHP. And when they came to us and asked to do a kind of a basic program that they wanted to promote, we were actually absolutely thrilled. I mean, it's just like the big leagues coming to the minor leagues and asking for us to help them. So we're in the process of doing that. In fact, I think most of it's almost done. I did my recording the other day, and I think it's going to be showcased at the December meeting that they have, I think, in New Orleans. We're going to be down there with a booth, and then I think it's going to be ready for people to subscribe or purchase. I understand maybe like in February or March. So we're real excited about it. We're really excited.
Yeah, and diversion is the focus, but what is the program?
Healthcare facility diversion. So different speakers from IHFDA tackling different subjects.
Is there intent to offer it as a certification so that people can be trained in how to?
I forget. I think there's. I forget. I wasn't involved in that part.
Yeah.
But if ASHP is going to do it, it'll be first class.
Yeah, some sort of training anyway to get, which is good because, when you start from scratch and try to train somebody, that it would be nice to refer them, do this first, look at all of these educational modules, and then we'll connect.
I think, I mean, they took we did a basic diversion thing that we still offer. And it's not exactly the same, but it's kind of mirrored off of that, if that makes sense.
Right. Yeah, makes sense. Okay. All right. Let's get back to a little bit more about John. So how did you meet your wife?
Oh, what? I'm sorry.
How did you meet your wife? Tell us a little bit about her, the woman behind the scenes.
Yes, she's an incredible lady. I met her. I was obviously in the police department, and she worked in the police credit union.
Okay.
And I volunteered to be on the credit committee, they call it. So we would decide on whether somebody would get a loan or not. And she was the person that we talked to. So I got to know her pretty well. Unfortunately, I went through a divorce just before that. And anyway, we eventually started dating and got married. So that was 38 years ago.
Wow, 38 years ago. Yep. Congratulations. Yeah,
Thanks.
That's a long time.
Thanks, yes.
Wow, you must have been married young the first time around if you've been married to her for 38 years.
I was 18 on the first one. And so, yes, it was, I always say I've been married more than 50 years, just not to the same woman.
Okay. So you volunteered.
She's an incredible wife. And as you know, I have some issues now with walking. So she's kind of a semi-caregiver too. And I couldn't add, I'm totally blessed having the wife that I have.
Yeah. In good times and in bad, right? I'll take care of you.
Absolutely. And we have 4 kids, 15 grandkids, and 6 great-grandkids. And
wow.
All of them, but 4 of them live within an hour of me. So
that is so fortunate.
It is. That's why I live in Cincinnati. To be honest with you, I would probably live in Florida or South Carolina or maybe Wyoming. Who knows? Rather than here. But when your kids and grandkids are all right here, families with, as you know, I'm speaking to the choir. As you know, family's everything.
Yeah. Yeah. That's great. So how many great grandkids?
6 and counting
6.
now.
And how old is the oldest and what is the
The
youngest?
oldest
If you can remember. Put you on the
yeah,
spot.
no, the oldest is either 4 or 5.
Okay.
And then they go down from there. So
Wow.
we have 6, and obviously we're going to have more. It's the
Yeah.
young group. Probably
A
no
lot
more
of little
grandkids.
ones.
Yes, probably no more grandkids.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. A lot of little ones. How often do you guys all do some holidays occasionally together?
Oh yeah,
Obviously,
we
in-laws
do
and stuff,
we
they
do
gotta
all the
coordinate.
holidays, and we do all the holidays, and then some things in between too. Maybe not everybody in between, but different groups who's ever available, or maybe an event's going on.
Yeah.
But everything I have here at the house was meant for grandkids. We have a swimming pool, we have a pond, we have 24 acres, we have a walking path. Everything. I don't use any of it. It was all done for grandkids. So
Yeah.
so they still come here so far.
They love it. They enjoy it. I know exactly what you mean. Our house, when our kids were growing up, we tried to do that, a pool table and a pool. And it's like, we
Yeah.
want this to be the house where the kids want to come and bring their friends.
Yeah.
And we still have that mindset as we're planning here now in Wyoming for
Yep.
what we want to do.
Yep.
That's great. That's a lot of people on your property at one time for every holiday.
Yeah, we had my one granddaughter got married here. In fact, I have a thing where I can marry people in Ohio. I married her here on the property, so that was pretty unique and a lot of fun. But
that is very special. Very,
Yeah.
very special.
Yeah.
Yeah. You
We're
mentioned you have some law enforcement now in your family,
Yep.
sons and grandson, I think you said.
Yep.
Anybody in the medical field?
Well, yeah, I have that too. First of all, I have 2 police officers in one agency, and then I have a third one, a grandson who's a sheriff's deputy, and he received the Presidential Medal of Valor that President Biden put on his neck, probably a year ago, which I'm very proud of. He saved a lady that drove into a pond to try and kill herself, and he went in and rescued her, and so he ended up with the Presidential Medal of Valor, which is really pretty cool. But
Wow.
but yes, I have. I'm trying to think how many. I've got several are nurses. There's at least 2 pharmacists. I have 2 granddaughters in college working on a nursing school. But yeah, and the one wants to be a doctor, and she's got that ability, I think, if she wants to. So yes, there's a lot of them in medical fields that we have in the family.
Yeah. Do you ever have conversations with them about this whole substance use disorder, diversion, give them the speech, the warning?
Oh yeah, I'm sure they suffer through some things that I tell them. Yes, the one nurse, Chelsea, who's at Children's, she's been to a couple of the conferences. She was at the conference in Chicago, actually, and so she's gotten into it. Yeah, I talked to him a little bit about it, like you say, the warnings and all of that. But
Yeah.
whether they listen to me, I'm not very sure.
Yeah.
But anyway, and it's a great group. And the one pharmacist, I had the 2 one's a grandson and one's my daughter-in-law, and I featured both. I featured her I used to write an article for Pharmacy Times, probably for 10 years, and I featured her in the Mug of the Month Club. She made an arrest, and we gave her a mug and everything. So they're all the medical people were well represented with medical folks.
Did you say she made an arrest?
Yeah, she caught a forged strip, and she called, and they arrested him. And her husband is one of the police officers, and I joked with him. I said, "She's made more felony arrests this week than you have," and which was true. And so she's in the Pharmacy Times magazine holding our mug. We gave her the Mug of the Month, we called it. So anyway,
that's cute. That's fun. That is really fun. Yeah.
I still bring it up sometimes.
Yeah. So you don't fly, is that correct? Yes. Correct. Okay. So every conference that you've had, and you've already said you've never had a conference in the same place twice, so they're not always close to home.
Right.
You drive. You and your wife. Did your wife always go?
Yep. Well, no. Here's the deal. I used to fly, And
Okay.
I'd like to tell you some story about how we, went down in the fiery crash and I saved half the plane and all that. But that's not the case. I
Okay.
was flying and coming home from Atlanta and Cincinnati. And we had to circle the lightning and all that. And I hated flying anyway, but I went. And so I told myself when I was up there, if I get down on the ground, I'm never flying again. And so far I've kept that promise. So that's it. Nothing, extraordinary happened to me. I used to fly. I just didn't like it, and I love driving. I'd be honest with you. I love to drive. When we went to the Denver one that we all just went to, I'm kind of a Western buff. We went to Tombstone, Arizona, and Tombstone, Arizona is where the big the OK Corral shootout was at, and Wyatt Earp is from. And Tombstone's got a lot of history. So we drove to Tombstone, and then we drove up to Denver. But I love to go to all the national parks. We've been to a ton of them. There's so much stuff you miss in this country if you don't drive,
Right.
including Kansas, by the way. I love I love your state too, Wyoming. It's just there's just a lot of beauty, and
Yeah.
So that's the bottom line. There's nothing.
Okay.
I wish I could tell you. Fiery crash, they saved a bunch of kids, but not the case.
No, but you did have a harrowing experience that made you just like, why do I do this to myself?
But I'm sure other people on that plane didn't think twice about it. It was just me, So,
oh, okay. Yeah, not that harrowing.
No, no. It was kind of my last straw, basically.
Yeah.
Is the way to look at it.
Yeah. From being stressed out about it. And you're right about the driving. I mean, if you have the time and you can enjoy yourself. My son used to laugh at my husband and I because he's like, I will get there. I'm going to go. I have my snacks. I stop for the bathroom and that is it. And then I am on my way. So he'll do it. Like get up at 3 a.m. and, try to make it in one day if it's reasonable, but it might be a long day. Whereas when they moved, we drove one of their cars between Colorado and California. And we're like, oh, we'll take Haley's car, his wife's car. We'll come get it. He did it in however many hours to go straight. And it took us like 4 days. And he's like, you guys don't know how to travel. And we're like, oh yeah, we do. We hiked in a couple of places. And it's like, this is how you do it. You don't have to get there. You've got to have the time.
We've completed most of Route 66 now too. We got down to Flagstaff, Arizona. So I don't know if you're familiar, but the route ends in Los Angeles. So when we went to Tombstone, we finished another leg of it. So we've only got a few hundred miles more to go.
Yeah. No, it's fun. It can be fun if you've got the time, most definitely.
Yep.
And, I'd like to travel more. And of course, it's all time. But my husband and I talk about it. There's so much in the U.S. that we haven't seen. Sure. That, let's spend some time in the U.S. doing that travel. Everybody thinks, oh, Europe, which, we'd love to go there as well. But it's like, well, let's explore the U.S. a little bit. And we have done more of that after moving to Wyoming because we're more in the middle.
Yes,
I have a friend of mine. Yeah, I have a friend of mine in San Diego as well, too. And they do a lot in their Sprinter. And she's like, we're in the elbow of the U.S. It's like anywhere we go, we got to get out of here first, But now that we're in Wyoming, we can.
You're relatively close to like southern Utah, where Zion National Park is, and Bryce. I don't know if you've ever been there, but those are incredible places.
We've done both of those places. We've gone into South Dakota and some beautiful places up in there. Definitely. What was your favorite host city for a conference?
I'd probably have to say Nashville. Okay. We were at Nashville with Natty several times, and I like Nashville for a lot of reasons, I guess. But the Nashville conference that we had, I guess it's been 2 or 3 years ago, it was very nice. And sometimes when you're talking about a conference, it depends on your experience at the hotel. In other words, was it a good experience or not? And that can make the difference. We had a good experience in Nashville, no question. The other place I like is where we just were, and that's Denver, because there's so much stuff right outside of Denver. Estes National Park, or you go west to the mountains, and there's an enormous amount of stuff right around Denver. So, but if I had to pick, it'd probably be Nashville.
Yeah. And you're right. Your perspective is different than the attendee because it's logistics for you guys and but that was fun. That was a fun conference, and you had the buses that took us to some places, and that was I think your conference there might have been my first time in Nashville.
Oh, was it?
Yeah, I think so. Since then, there have been a couple other things going on there that I've had to go into Nashville for, but I think maybe the IHFDA conference was the first time I've been there, and I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, it's a neat place. And what we did was we put a thing out about. That's how we ended up in Denver. We put a thing out with like 3 or 4 cities and said pick them.
Right.
And it was Nashville or Denver was by far the first choice.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I liked it. I could drive. There's one I could.
Yes. Yeah, I know. It's good for you. Especially if you get somebody to drop you off, right?
And I did.
I know you did. I remember.
Yeah. So are there any behind the scenes or bloopers with IHFDA that you can share? I mean, I'm sure that it was a lot of work getting things organized. You guys have grown tremendously. I know your board, the number of your board members is expanding. It seems exponentially. And so a lot of growth there. But I can just picture you guys, the night before or the week before, just completely exhausted trying to organize logistics. But any bloopers or nightmares you recall?
Well, you hit the nail on the head. Number one, we have an incredible staff now. The staff has gotten better since day one. I mean, it's just an incredible bunch of people. And yes, the conference is probably the last few weeks, there's always something going on as far as there's a problem here or somebody wants to register for half the classes and how much would that cost? And there's just things that come up constantly. But eventually this hotel we had in Denver actually worked very well with us. And that's the other part is the hotel flexible. That can make your experience a lot better if they're willing to work with you because things pop up. And you forget things. I can remember one year we forgot to ask about having internet in the room. Well, when you get to the conference and you haven't put that in your contract, it's $1,000 a day. And and so we eventually worked that out, $1,000 for the whole conference. But then eventually you learn, and the contracts are really important because you need to get things in there like the internet, which saves you a ton of money. And if you're not smart enough,
which you would think was a given,
exactly.
Right?
And all that is they go over and flip a switch. It's not like you got to bring 14 people in to set up a bunch of wires. So it's definitely a thing. But I'm sure they all love it when we don't put in a contract. So we learned from that. So you learn things like that save money. And working with the hotels, and Marcia is the one that works with the hotel in Denver. She did a great job. The one I want to tell you about one time, and it was with Natty actually, and we were in Charlotte, North Carolina, and we had finished the last full day, and the next day was to be a half day, and we were done. And so that night those days we had like a get together the last evening, and I can remember well. We were there, and all of a sudden all the lights went out, and I mean all the lights went out, and the bottom line was they had a big ice storm. The hotel did not have a generator. And so what happened was, you went back to your room, and my room was pitch black. And the only way you could find the restroom is I had to take my cell phone and turn it on to find your way to the bathroom. And
wow.
So anyway, the next morning, it was cold, of course, and we got through it. But the lights never did come on before we left. So we all left. Fortunately, it happened on the last night. It could have happened, earlier than that. But that was one you don't forget. That's for sure. It was something else. When you got, I don't know, we had probably 200-300 people there that, and the lights went out. They were all like in a big conference area, just talking, socializing, and all of a sudden the lights were gone. So,
like, whoops.
Yep. And of course you think like any other time, well, they'll come back on in 10 minutes,
right.
How some things are. No, it was a day and a half and they still didn't go on. So
Wow.
That's probably the blooperous kind of thing, but there's a ton of stuff. If somebody decides to do this, there's just a lot of, and like I said, the hotel, picking the hotel and the contract and doing some shopping around and doing some negotiating. There's negotiations you can do with them. They may say, hey, we're going to charge you. You need to spend $60,000 a day, and we're only going to spend 30 or 40. So there's ways to work it around. And somebody that I would suggest, if you have an organization, that you probably find a person that's good and likes it, and then keep them so that they have that experience to do it year after year.
Sure.
If that makes sense. Putting
Yeah.
new people in and learning every year is not a good idea. Doesn't
Right,
work well.
right. Yeah, no, that makes sense. And the food as well, too. You guys have done a great job. I am no longer a meat eater, so it's like, oh, what options are you going to have? And I know there are others in the same position, too, with those dietary things. And so trying to kind of keep all of that in mind, even if that, it's not the first nature for somebody who eats everything, to kind of think about, like, oh, well, what are other options?
Right. And a good hotel is flexible too. You come in and say, hey, I'm a vegan or a vegetarian, or maybe I have other issues. They should be able to adjust to that. But some places, that's why I say the hotel you pick, we've always pretty much gone with brand name hotels, whether it's Marriott or Hyatt or whatever. And they're usually the ones that have the space too. It's not that you couldn't do a different kind of hotel, but a lot of those places don't have space for 200-300 people.
Yeah, they're more boutique hotel.
All right, exactly.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Exactly.
Well, you're retiring at the end of the year. So do you have any other plans for what you're going to do with the time you're going to get back? Or are you just going to enjoy that family of yours?
Well, I'm definitely going to enjoy the family. That's number one. But I'm doing a series on FarmCon now about pharmacy robberies. So I'm doing a little bit of stuff there, but that's, that doesn't take up a lot of my time. And my wife tells me that I have what she calls play dates. So about 2 times a week, at least, I have a luncheon with retired police officers, and we sit around and tell lies and other stories and eat lunch.
Oh, they've grown.
But it gets you out of the house and gets you doing things rather than sitting and doing nothing. So I'm not a very good sit and do nothing person. So
I can imagine that. Yeah.
So that's it. But as far as anything real involved, and I'm telling you, the people, I'm leaving IHFDA in just incredible shape. I couldn't be happier. This last year, I should have probably left a year ago, is the truth. I mean, I've been kind of a figurehead. These people have run this thing. Any good thing there is to say at the conference is it's totally their deal, not mine. And I feel totally comfortable, I guess, in leaving it in their hands, if that makes sense.
Right. Yeah, no, things run very smoothly. They really do a great job. Do you think we'll see you at any conferences in the future?
I think that's possible. Again, we like to travel. Next year is in Frisco, just north of Dallas, where we were once before. And that's a great venue also. So yeah, I might. I mean, I've got a lot of old friends there, like you, and a lot of other folks. So maybe. I guess the answer would be
if it works with your travel plans.
Yeah, exactly. And of course, I have to talk to the boss. She has some input too. So
yes, absolutely. All right. Well, this was nice. Some of this I knew, a lot of it I didn't know. So it's nice getting to know you a little bit better. Do not be a stranger. Stay in touch, and thank you for sharing this time.
Thank you, Terri. I really appreciate it. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.